Bran Stark had not yet understood the true vastness of his gifts. The green sight came to him in fragments, elusive glimmers perched on the edge of his mind and scuttling away whenever he reached for them. His warding into summer was a comfort, offering respite from the broken shell of his body, but it brought questions as well as answers. Why was he so attuned to the direwolf's senses? Why did the old gods whisper in his dreams, speaking of 1,000 roots stretching beneath winter soil, weaving visions of ravens, storms, and rivers running red? It was late in the evening when the dream first seized him. He had fallen asleep in a drafty chamber of the tower they had claimed for the night, Hodder slumbering near the door, Mira and Jojen Reed keeping quiet watch while the wind howled outside. Bran shut his eyes, and at once he was in the darkness of the godwood. An ancient heart tree watched him with eyes that bled sap the color of fresh wounds. The moon above was pale, shattered by drifting clouds. He heard the crunch of steel on bone, the wet hush of swords carving into flesh, the pitiful cries of frightened men and women. A raven soared in the darkness, cawing a single phrase, "Flee! Flee!" Then it alighted on his arm, gazing with its single black eye. Where its other eye should have been, there was only darkness. Bran could not speak to it, but he felt its urgency. He felt the clarion of alarm. Amid the swirling shadows, he saw a high hall festooned with banners, the bridge of House Frye, twin towers in pale blue on a gray field. He glimpsed torches flickering against stone walls. Servants carried trays of bread and salt, horns of ale, sacks of flour. A wedding was beginning. His heart lurched. There was a bride in a pale gown, trembling at the end of a long table. The sweet, cloying stink of wine and false smiles lingered in the air. Then came the cries again, echoing from the depths of Bran's mind, swords being drawn, the savage glint of crossbow bolts in mid-flight, and the thick, rich smell of blood. Stark blood. He recognized Robb's face through the swirl of madness, his brother's eyes wide, disbelief swirling there like a hurricane. A woman's scream, raw with anguish, tore through the dream. Then a monstrous wave of blackness swallowed it all. When he awoke, he was shouting in the night, tangled in bedding. Jojen was already kneeling beside him, face pale, eyes searching Bran's. Mira stood behind her brother with a spear in her hand, poised to defend against whatever threat might have roused Bran's terror. Hodder was awake too, back pressed against the cold stone wall, frightened. Hodder, he murmured, uncertain. Bran's voice stumbled out in a hush. Robb, something terrible is going to happen. I saw him. I saw the twins. A wedding. And blood everywhere. He felt tears seep down his cheeks, the weight of the dream pressing upon him. Jojen exchanged a look with Mira, then placed a hand gently on Bran's arm. The young Crannogman had the look of someone who knew more of such visions than he wished to. We've heard rumors of Robb's alliances, Jojen said softly. They say King Robb intends to repair his bond with the Freys by taking one of them as his wife or by wedding Edmure Tully in his place. But your dream suggests something darker. Bran nodded, still breathless, still trembling. If it's a green dream, then it's almost certain. Unless I can do something. The words echoed in the small, chilly chamber, carrying hope and dread all at once. Mira's eyebrows arched with concern. What can we do? We're too far away. The roads are thick with enemies. The Ironborn still hold parts of the north. Roose Bolton and the Lannisters, so many dangers lie between us and the twins. Bran swallowed, his throat raw from his frightened cry. He pressed a palm to his temple as if he could push away the memory of the gore he had seen. I'm not sure, he confessed, but if there's a chance to save Robb, we have to try. The dream, it felt so real. I could taste the blood on my tongue. The old gods are warning me, and I can't just ignore it. Jojen took a moment to breathe, then glanced at Summer, who stood alert in a corner, amber eyes glowing. Your powers are greater than you realize, Bran. There may be a way. You might not be able to ride all the way to the twins, but the eyes of your dire wolf, the eyes of ravens, the world can be seen in many ways if you know how to look. Bran realized Jojen was right. His body was frail, traveling quickly was nearly impossible, especially in the midst of war. But he remembered the growing sense of unity he felt whenever he slipped into Summer's skin, how the old gods occasionally allowed him vantage points no mortal eyes could achieve. Perhaps, in some ephemeral way, he could be present, even across leagues. Jojen seemed to read his mind. Time is short, Bran, he said. If this is truly to come to pass and the wedding is upon us, we must leave soon or find another way. We can't stand idle. I won't, Bran vowed, fists clenched against the bedding. We leave at first light. For the twins. Mira swallowed, nodding her agreement, though worry filled her eyes. We'll do whatever we can. And if your dream is right, then every moment we delay could be the difference between life and death. They set out in silence, leaving behind the tower that had offered them one frigid night's shelter. They traveled as swiftly as they could manage, Hodder carrying Bran on his back while Mira and Jojen scouted ahead. The roads were muddy, slick with melted snow and the remnants of autumn rains. Winter threatened on the horizon but had yet to fully claim the land. Fields lay empty and half-harvested, the small folk either in hiding or pressed into service by one army or another. Often, they had to hide themselves in thickets or behind crumbling walls, listening to the drumbeat of horses' hooves and the clank of armor as soldiers passed. Some wore the lion of Lannister, some the flayed man of House Bolton. Occasionally, they came across the broken corpses of men or the carcass of a horse left to rot by the roadside. War had stained the realm, a slow but thorough corruption. Every day, Bran felt his sense of dread grow sharper, like a needle twisting in his mind. The wedding was looming, and the memory of his vision would not let him rest. He tried to hone his powers on the journey, slipping more often into Summer's skin. He felt the direwolf's sinewy muscles stretch and coil, tasted the scents of deer, fox, and hare. Sometimes he soared into a raven, letting the wind buffet his wings, scanning the roads for patrols or searching for glimpses of the fry banners along the river. But each time he withdrew back into his crippled body, a wave of fatigue nearly drowned him. Jojen would hold him upright, whispering that he had to pace himself, that his gift could overwhelm him if he was not careful. Yet Bran could not hold back, his brother's life was at stake. They were still a good distance from the twins when they heard that King Robb had already arrived for the wedding. A band of filthy travelers had camped a short way down the road, and Mira managed to learn from them that Edmure Tully's nuptials would be celebrated in 2 days' time. The travelers spoke in hushed tones of the hardships the Freys had endured when Robb spurned them the first time. They said Lord Walder Frey was an old man with a memory as sharp as a razor, and that if he meant to make peace this time, it would come at a steep price. Bran's heart hammered in his chest. 2 days was all they had, and the road still stretched on. They resumed their travel at once, though the pace was punishing. That night, Bran slipped into uneasy sleep. In his dreams, he was back in the Godwood with the heart tree, sap streaming like tears. The raven perched upon a low branch, croaking the same warning. This time, though, Bran felt something else stirring in him. A power half known, as if the roots under the earth reached up to cradle his mind. He sensed that if he dared, if he let those roots draw him under the skin of the world, perhaps he could speak to those who needed warning. When he awoke, the chill of possibility still clung to his bones. They continued on until the shape of the twins came into view, 2 squat towers looming on either side of the Green Fork, the wide river spanned by a great stone bridge. Banners fluttered in the distance. They dared not approach openly. Jojen reasoned that they should find a place to hide, perhaps in the cover of the thinning woods that dotted the area. Indeed, they found a small grove of twisted willows and oaks on the western side of the river, with a vantage point just high enough to see the top of one of the Frey towers. That night, Mira went to scout closer, returning with grim news. "The wedding's to begin at dusk tomorrow," she told them. "Robb is within the castle. The Freys are all in a state of peculiar excitement. The men on the walls, though, the way they watch, it's as if they're expecting violence. They're armed to the teeth, wearing armor even at a wedding feast. Walder Frey claims it's because they're in the midst of war, but it's more than that. I can feel it." Bran remembered the dream, that monstrous swirl of crossbow bolts and screams. "We must warn Robb," he said, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. "But we'll never be allowed inside. Not with me a cripple, and we have no invitation. Even if we tried to slip in, they'd catch us." Jojen's face was tight with concern. "Perhaps there is a way for you to reach Robb without physically stepping into the castle. Your powers, Bran. You told me the old gods speak in your dreams. We know the heart trees see through the eyes carved into them, that ravens fly between realms with messages. Perhaps you can use your gift to slip past the gates and find your brother." Bran swallowed hard. Since leaving Winterfell, he had discovered new layers to his powers, each deeper and more frightening than the last. If he attempted something so bold and failed, his mind might be lost or shattered. But if he did not try, Robb might die. He imagined his brother's face the last time they had seen each other, the proud gaze of the king in the north, so sure in his cause. "I have to try," Bran said at last. That evening, with the towers of the twins looming in silhouette against the darkening sky, they made their camp hidden amid a cluster of boulders and a fallen oak. Mira set up a rudimentary shelter, Jojen stood watch, and Hodder hunkered down with Bran to keep him warm. Summer prowled the perimeter, restless. The wind carried faint echoes of music from the castle, strings and drums, the sound of feasting and celebration. Bran closed his eyes, inhaled, and let himself sink. He reached out first for Summer, feeling the direwolf's powerful body. Then he went deeper, calling with some part of himself he did not fully understand, the part that was touched by the old gods. Everything went black at once, and then he was soaring above the banquet hall. Wind whipped at his face. He was no longer in Summer's body. This was something else, a raven's vantage. He looked down at the courtyard awash in torchlight, at the slow trickle of guests entering the great hall, at the men in Fry livery fanning out along the walls. His heart hammered in his chest. He attempted to will himself closer. He felt a moment of terror as he plummeted, dipping through a window high in the tower. Suddenly, he was inside a corridor lit by flickering torches. Servants bustled about, carrying trays of roasted meats and flagons of wine, complaining in hushed voices about Lord Walder's demands. He pressed on, searching for Robb with a single-minded urgency. Doors rushed past in a blur until he found the great hall itself, a cavernous space lit with hundreds of candles, the smell of garlic and spiced wine thick in the air. He saw Robb near the dais, flanked by his mother, Catelyn Stark, and a group of men wearing the direwolf sigil. Robb looked weary, but a polite smile was fixed on his face as he spoke with one of Walder Frey's brood. Edmure Tully stood nearby, the awkward groom glancing nervously between the sullen Freys and the Starks. Walder Frey himself was perched in a high-backed chair, eyes glittering like a spider waiting in its web. Bran sensed it then, a rancid undertone in the hall's atmosphere. Guards stood at every corner, their crossbows suspiciously loaded. The music was a shade too merry, as if trying to smother the tension that thickened the air like a fetid fog. Hovering near the rafters as if he were indeed a raven, Bran wanted to scream at Robb to run, to see the trap for what it was. But though he had come so far in his powers, he did not know how to speak with a human voice in this form. He could only watch. Panic clawed at him. His mother's face looked pinched and anxious. She too sensed something wrong. Then Walder Frey stood with an arthritic creak. His voice, scratchy and mocking, echoed through the hall. "My honored guests," he said, raising a goblet. "It gladdens my old heart to see the union of our families. We are one now, are we not?" He paused for effect, letting the words loom in the hush. Yet a wedding calls for more than just words. Let there be music. The musicians in the gallery began a rousing tune, but it shifted after a few measures into a bitter melody. The Rains of Castamere. A Lannister song. Bran felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He could see the lines of worry deepen on Catelyn Stark's face. Robb frowned and half-turned as if to question the choice. In that heartbeat, Bran saw crossbows rise, saw metal glint as hidden daggers were unsheathed. Walder Frey's thin lips curled in a cruel grin. The moment threatened to unfold exactly as Bran's vision had promised, a torrent of blood and death. Bran poured every ounce of will he had into that raven's body. He cawed, a desperate shriek that rang out across the great hall. The music faltered as some turned to look at the frantic bird overhead. Robb's head jerked upward, his eyes meeting the black gaze of the raven. For an instant, Bran felt a spark of recognition pass between them as though Robb somehow knew. Move, Bran thought. Move, run, fight. Robb's eyes widened. Perhaps it was only animal instinct, but he seemed to understand the threat. He caught his mother's arm. Catelyn was already turning toward one of Walder Frey's wives who had begun to flee. The crossbow snapped, but Robb jerked sideways, pushing Edmure Tully down with him behind a long trestle table. Bolts thudded into the wood, missing him by inches. Chaos erupted. Frey men leapt onto the dais, swords flashing, but the Northmen were still armed. Shouts of betrayal filled the hall. Catelyn Stark seized a dagger from a fallen guardsman. Despite the swirl of panic, her eyes were sharp with maternal fury. She lunged to protect Robb, blocking a blade meant for his neck. Steel rang against steel. Bran caught again, circling in the rafters. Below, the Starks and Tullys were outnumbered, but they were not taken wholly unawares as in Bran's original vision. The warning, though small, had bought them precious seconds. Men loyal to Robb tore swords from scabbards. Grey Wind, Robb's direwolf, howled from the courtyard, attacking any who stood in his way. Walder Frey cursed, shrieking commands. More crossbowmen appeared on the balconies above. Bolts rained down, striking both friend and foe in the indiscriminate chaos. The bride, Roslyn, screamed in horror, blood spattering her pale gown. Robb fought like a man possessed, determined to shield his mother and defend his bannermen. His sword was red, his face contorted with grief and rage. Men in Fry colors lunged at him and he parried, lashing out in fluid arcs. Beside him, Catelyn's dagger flickered, fiercely warding off an attacker who towered over her. She took a wound to her arm, but she did not yield. Bran, watching all of this, felt the burden of it weigh upon his soul. He had changed something, but was it enough? The Freys still held the advantage in numbers and surprise. The hall was a slaughterhouse. The rains of Castamere continued to screech in the corner, a mocking soundtrack to the carnage. But for the first time, the outcome was no longer certain. Robb was not yet riddled with bolts. His dire wolf was alive. The dream was cracked, but not wholly undone. Summoning every bit of the strange green seer magic that churned within him, Bran forced himself to land on the banister near Walder Frey. The old man stood behind a row of armed guards, spitting fury as he directed his men. The raven's presence startled him. Bran cawed, flapping his wings violently, trying to distract the guards. For a heartbeat, it worked. One guard whipped around, slashing at the bird. Bran hopped back just in time. A crossbowman, uncertain of his aim, hesitated. In that second, Robb hurled himself forward. He seized a tall candelabrum from the floor and smashed it into the crossbowman's side, sending him tumbling. Walder Frey screeched indignation, stumbling backward into his chair. At the dais' far side, Catelyn snatched a fallen shield to protect herself from another volley of bolts. The next moments blurred. Northmen reeled as more bolts hissed through the air. Some collapsed with screams, blood staining the rushes on the floor. But a group of Umbermen had pushed their way in from an adjoining hall, alerted by the ruckus. Roaring with fury, they hewed into the Frey ranks, redrawing the lines of the battle. Bolts struck them too, but for every Northman that fell, a Frey soon followed as the madness soared to a pitched crescendo. And overhead, the raven caught again and again. Bran felt his consciousness fray under the strain, but he couldn't leave. He had to see this through. Then he spotted Grey Wind charging through a side entrance, muzzle stained with gore, eyes wild. The great direwolf barreled into a knot of Frey men, tearing them apart. Walder Frey's eyes bulged at the sight. He tried to retreat, but Robb caught him by the collar of his robes, slamming him into his carved wooden chair. The old man flailed, bones brittle with age. "Traitor!" Walder screeched, spittle spraying his lips. "You killed my men," Robb growled, voice shaking with equal parts sorrow and wrath. "What has House Frey done?" But even in that heartbeat, Robb realized it was no use. Words would not stop Walder Frey's betrayal, steel might. Walder's guards lunged. Robb spun, sword clashing. Grey Wind lunged at them from the side, snapping. Walder Frey tumbled from his chair. The old lord coughed, scurrying behind his men, his fury giving way to a desperate flight to save himself. He shrieked orders to kill Robb, Catelyn, anyone loyal to Stark. The clash of weapons grew relentless. Screams multiplied. Bodies fell. Still, the presence of the Northmen from the other halls had turned the tide from a quick massacre into a savage melee. In the chaos, it was Catelyn who cornered Walder Frey. She had lost her dagger, replaced by a sword pried from a fallen man's hand. Blood streaked her face and soaked her once elegant gown. Her eyes blazed with a mother's vengeance. She slashed at the men who protected Walder, wounding one in the thigh. Then she pressed the blade to Walder's throat, forcing him back against a pillar. "Stop this," she cried, voice ragged. "Call your men off." He stared at her, watery eyes betraying fear, yet also a vile cunning. "You have no right," he spat. "You broke faith with me. Your son broke his oath. And you think that justifies this butchery?" Catelyn shouted. "End it or you die." Her blade pressed dangerously into his wrinkled flesh. "BLO." OD dripped onto the floor. Walder Frey opened his mouth, perhaps to call for a ceasefire or to unleash more vitriol, but he never had the chance to speak. One of his own men, trying to strike Catelyn from behind, stumbled into Walder instead. The weapon sliced deep across his side. Walder gasped, eyes bulging. Catelyn staggered back as warm blood spattered her. With a shudder, Lord Walder toppled, choking on his own breath. For a moment, all went still around them, as if even the war drums of chaos had paused. The old man lay on the ground, twitching, his lifeblood pooling around him. It was a grotesque sight, but there was a sort of poetic justice in it, too. Catelyn stared, shock mingling with a fierce, hollow triumph. "Stop," she cried again, her voice echoing in the great hall, broken with grief. "Stop this madness." Somewhere, a Frey soldier gave the order to keep fighting, but with Walder Frey dead and Grey Wind rampaging through the hall, the carefully orchestrated betrayal had crumbled. Panic seized the Freys. They had hoped for a swift, calculated slaughter, but it had devolved into savage hand-to-hand fighting where they could no longer distinguish friend from foe in the press. Robb bellowed for his men to hold formation. Gradually, the Northmen's discipline began to show as they forced the Freys to yield or perish. Bran, still in the Raven, trembled at the edge of his consciousness. The tension in the hall was suffocating. At last, crossbows and swords began to clatter to the ground as surviving Freys realized the tide had turned. Some attempted to flee. Others dropped to their knees, pleading. The bloody feast was over, but the cost was high. Dozens of Northmen lay dead or dying. Edmure Tully had been wounded. Catelyn had a deep slash in her arm. Grey Wind had taken a glancing crossbow bolt to the flank, though he still stood, snarling in protectiveness for his master. And there, amid the carnage, stood Robb, breathing hard, eyes reflecting unspeakable sorrow as he looked on the ruin that might have been far worse. High above, the Raven's breath, Bran's breath shuddered. Robb was alive. Mother was alive. The betrayal was exposed. Walder Frey was dead. Bran had changed the future. But at what cost? He felt the tug of his own physical body, weak and exhausted, leagues away in the grove outside the castle walls. The light in the great hall flickered, the air thick with the stench of blood, smoke, and spilled ale. Slowly, darkness crept in around Bran's vision. He let himself slip free, the Raven dissolving into blackness. He sank back into himself, gasping as if surfacing from deep water. He was cold, drenched in sweat, his limbs trembling. Jojen was beside him, supporting him. Mira hovered close with concern etched into her features. "Bran," she whispered, voice taut with worry. "Bran, are you all right?" He opened his eyes, struggling to focus. Summer nosed his leg, whining softly. Hodder murmured, Hodder, with uncertainty. They're alive," Bran managed to say. His voice was hoarse, little more than a rasp. I warned them and they fought back." Tears filled his eyes. "Robb is still alive. Mother is alive." Relief blossomed on Mira's face. "Then your vision was wrong?" "Not wrong," Bran said, breathing shakily. "I changed it." Jojen's lips were tight. "You did something extraordinary," he said, awe and concern mingling in his voice. "But the repercussions, they might be great. Walder Frey's death, the Frey's betrayal exposed to all the realm, this changes everything." Bran nodded, tears hot on his cheeks. He remembered the savage chaos he had witnessed through the Raven's eyes. "At least I saved them," he whispered. "That's all that matters right now." But deep down, he knew Jojen was right. The ripple of consequences would spread across the rivers and hills of the Seven Kingdoms, changing alliances, fueling fresh hatreds, altering the Game of Thrones in unpredictable ways. For the moment, though, Bran was too tired and drained to dwell on that. He sank against Hodder, letting exhaustion claim him. When he woke again, dawn was a pale shimmer over the horizon. His limbs felt like lead. Jojen and Mira were packing up their small camp, casting anxious glances toward the castle towers. Already, the place seemed different. Fewer banners whipped in the breeze and no trumpets sounded. Crows circled. The wedding was done and the aftermath had begun. "We can't stay here," Mira said softly when Bran looked at her. "Robb will be searching for the rest of his host. He might look for you if someone saw that Raven behaving strangely. It could draw dangerous attention if he learns you're this close." Bran struggled to sit upright. He knew they were right. "If they do try to find me, it might endanger them," he said softly. He closed his eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. "But I need to see my brother to know he's safe." "It's too great a risk," Jojen insisted. "Men loyal to the Lannisters, the Boltons, or even the Freys might still be around, waiting for vengeance. You are worth more than a mere hostage. You are the heir to Winterfell. We can't let you be taken." "But we're so close," Bran pleaded, tears threatening again. He pictured Robb, battered but alive, standing in a hall littered with bodies, wearing a king's mantle that felt heavier than ever. I just want to see him with my own eyes." Mira's voice was gentle. "You did what you set out to do, Bran. You saved him. You changed the future. That's no small thing. But sometimes the best thing we can do is leave well enough alone." Hodder echoed, Hodder, in a low, uncertain tone, as if in sympathy. Bran bowed his head, swallowing the ache that swelled in his chest. His mind was telling him that Jojen and Mira were right, that there was too much danger, that he must continue his journey north to find the three-eyed crow as Jojen insisted. The old gods had plans for him, powers that needed nurturing. Robb had his own war to fight, his own path to follow. It pained Bran to realize how separate their destinies were. He forced himself to nod. "All right," he said, voice shaking. "Let's go." The small company packed their things in silence. Bran glanced over his shoulder one last time at the distant towers. Light glinted off the river, and in the quiet, he thought he could hear echoes of crows calling. They had survived the Red Wedding, but the price in blood was still high. He tried to find solace in knowing that it was not the total annihilation he had witnessed in his dream, that at least hope remained for House Stark. But a tremor of fear ran through him. The future was unknown, more so now than ever. They wound their way from the grove, slipping down muddy paths, crossing fields where half-burned huts testified to recent battles. Smoke rose from farmsteads in the distance. The realm was a patchwork of ruin, the ground soiled by war. Bran had become part of this war in a way he had never imagined, not by sword or shield but by a power older and more mysterious. He wondered if, one day, it would be up to him to heal the wounds that festered in the kingdom. That was a daunting thought for a boy who could neither walk nor properly wield a sword. All that day, they traveled slowly but steadily, always aware of the possibility of outriders or roving soldiers. Mira hunted small game and Jojen stayed close by Bran's side, his eyes distant in thought. Hodder bore Bran's weight cheerfully, though worry was plain in the giant's soft expression. Night fell and they found shelter under an outcropping of rock. The river was far behind them, but the specter of the twins still haunted Bran's dreams when he drifted off. In the darkness of his slumber, he saw fleeting images of Robb leading what remained of his forces away from the twins, the men wounded and weary but alive. He saw Walder Frey's daughters cursing his name, clutching at their dying father. He saw crows pecking at the corpses in the great hall. And he saw something else, a great black shape, half-wolf, half-man, standing at the mouth of a crypt beneath Winterfell, whispering his name, Bran, come to me. It was the voice of the three-eyed crow, or something more primal still. He shuddered awake, skin clammy with sweat. In the days that followed, word spread across the countryside like wildfire. The Red Wedding had been a trap, but it had failed to claim all of House Stark. The betrayal was laid bare. Walder Frey was slain, along with many of his kin. King Robb Stark had escaped with wounds, though not mortal ones, and Lady Catelyn too still lived. Many Northmen had died, but many Freys lay dead beside them. Rumors abounded. Some claimed a giant wolf had burst into the hall to tear out Walder Frey's throat. Others said it was witchcraft, that a raven's call had alerted Robb in the nick of time. A few whispered that Bran Stark, the crippled boy rumored to be lost or dead, had somehow been involved. Most scoffed at such talk as fancy. Bran's group heard these rumors around campfires and from passing travelers who occasionally shared the road. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing with suspicion at any stranger who might be a spy for the Freys or Boltons. The realm shook under the revelation that the Freys had attempted such a monstrous betrayal and failed. Even more shocking was the possibility that the king in the north still lived. The Lannisters would not be pleased by this outcome. Nor would Roose Bolton, newly elevated Warden of the North for King Joffrey. The war, instead of winding toward a horrifying end, had been reignited with new vigor. Once, in the dusk of a quiet wood, they encountered a handful of Northmen stragglers, battered survivors from the wedding. Bran recognized the sigil of House Mormont on their cloaks. The men had no idea who Bran was, or if they did, they gave no sign. They were armed and their faces betrayed heartbreak and anger, but they merely asked for directions north, hoping to rally with any loyalists. Mira gave them a vague answer, and they departed without further conversation. Later that night, Bran wept quietly. I wish I could have saved more, he said, face buried in his hands. They lost so many good men. Mira touched his shoulder. You gave them a chance they did not have before. Sometimes that's all we can do. War is cruel, no matter which side you stand on. And so they pressed onward, the specters of what might have been trailing them like shadows. Their path took them across lonely roads and through deserted villages. Occasionally, they saw columns of smoke rising to the west, evidence of fresh battles or pillaging. The realm was ablaze, and though the destruction weighed heavily on Bran, he felt some small measure of pride that at least his brother, his king, lived to fight for the north. As days bled into weeks, the tales of the failed Red Wedding grew more elaborate. Some claimed Robb Stark had turned into a dire wolf mid-feast. Others whispered that Lady Catelyn was an undead spirit whose thirst for vengeance allowed her to butcher Walder Frey herself. And always, in the background, there was that notion of a raven's cry at the critical moment. Bran listened in silence whenever such stories surfaced. He did not speak of what he knew. Even Jojen and Mira seemed reluctant to dwell on the details, as if the memory of so much bloodshed was too raw. They continued their journey north, heading ever closer to the wall, for Jojen insisted that Bran's destiny lay beyond it. Hodder carried him without complaint, forging through the increasingly harsh terrain. Sleep came fitfully to Bran. Each time he closed his eyes, he dreamed of wolves and ravens, of ancient trees with carved faces that wept blood-red sap. And sometimes he saw Robb in those dreams. Older, wearier, but still alive, forging alliances among the outraged river lords and the outraged families of the north who now thirsted for vengeance against the Freys. He saw glimmers of battles yet to come, of Karstarks returning to the fold, of Boltons being hunted in the snows. He also glimpsed a larger threat, a swirl of white, an icy wind howling across the land, an army of the dead under a pale, pitiless sky. Even if the Red Wedding had been averted, the realm's squabbles were as nothing compared to what lurked beyond the wall. Those fleeting images chilled Bran more than any northern wind. When he confided this to Jojen, the Crannogman's face tightened. "I've seen it too, in my green dreams," Jojen said. "A threat older than the Seven Kingdoms stirring in the far north. Maybe, just maybe, your intervention in the south will give your brother enough time to rally the living for the war that truly matters. But we must make haste. You must learn the full extent of your power." Bran nodded. Though he longed for Winterfell, he understood that home was a different concept now. He was a child no longer, not truly. He was something else, shaped by the old god's whispers, by the direwolf's heartbeat under the moon, by the raven's black wings. He might never again sit in the great hall of Winterfell the way he once had, a boy with a bright future and whole legs beneath him. But he had a duty that reached across all houses, all crowns. They went north and north still, the days shortening, the nights growing colder. Bran took comfort in the silent companionship of summer, in Mira's hunting skill, in Jojen's soft-spoken guidance, and in Hodder's simple, steady presence. The events at the Twins weighed on them all, but there was no going back, only forward into uncharted territory. One morning, as they forded a half-frozen stream, Bran saw a large flock of ravens lift from the treetops in the distance, cawing as they wheeled across the ashen sky. He watched them with a pang of longing, remembering how he had soared among them on that fateful night, how he had changed fate. To him, they seemed to be calling out, "This way, boy. This way, little Stark. The old gods await." He wondered how Robb fared. Perhaps his brother was gathering allies, healing wounds both physical and political. Perhaps he was on the march again, determined to press the war. Bran could do no more for him. He had handed Robb a thread of hope and undone a monstrous betrayal. The rest was up to the king in the north. With a sigh, Bran turned his head from the ravens and urged Hodder onward. Far to the south, the reverberations of the averted Red Wedding shook the Seven Kingdoms. The Freys, once considered cunning opportunists, now found themselves in disarray. Many lesser Freys scrambled to keep hold of their lands. Lothar Frey and Black Walder were among the casualties. Some knights who had participated in the betrayal found themselves hunted by outraged Northmen led by the great Jon Umber and other fierce lords who had survived. Word spread that the twins had been seized by Robb Stark after the failed massacre, albeit at tremendous cost, and that the king in the north was using the Frey holdings as leverage to press demands upon the Riverlands. House Bolton had attempted to position itself favorably with the Freys and Lannisters, but the abrupt downfall of Walder Frey disrupted their schemes. Rumors abounded that Roose Bolton might send a force to relieve the twins from Stark occupation, but the Bolton ranks were thinned by various skirmishes and the dread fort faced its own unrest. The north was far from stable, but the Boltons had lost a key ally in House Frey's reliability. Roose's bastard, Ramsay, was rumored to be even more brutal and unstable than his father, yet he was not enough to tip the scales by himself. All across the Riverlands, smallfolk quietly rejoiced that the Freys had not gotten away with their treachery. Though many lords claimed no love for House Stark, even fewer admired a house that would break sacred guest right. For some, the name Frey became synonymous with dishonor. In the Crownlands, King Joffrey raged and demanded swift retribution. Tywin Lannister, ever calculating, saw an opportunity slip away, and in his silent fury, he began maneuvering new pieces on the board. The Tyrells watched from Highgarden, uncertain how best to exploit these developments. Dorne bided its time, as it always did, waiting to see which way the wind blew. And in Riverrun, Edmure Tully, though wounded, returned a reluctant lord, determined to shore up alliances with his nephew Robb. For the first time in months, the Riverlords had a glimmer of hope that the war against the Iron Throne might not be lost. Amid this turbulent backdrop, Robb Stark called a council of his bannermen and allies in the battered Great Hall of the Twins. The once gleaming floors were stained with dried blood. Many tapestries were slashed, and the rancid smell of spoiled food lingered in the corners. Frey corpses had been moved outside for burning. The atmosphere was grim but resolute. Robb, his arm bandaged and his strength not fully returned, presided from the high seat that had once belonged to Walder Frey. Catelyn Stark sat beside him, her face pale and lined with grief for all the dead but proud of her son's survival. Lord Umber was there, the Blackfish Brynden Tully was there, and other loyal lords who had not perished in the ambush. They discussed strategy, supplies, the condition of their men. They spoke of winter's approach and the uncertain roads ahead. Some counseled that they should retreat to the north and recover their strength. Others argued they should strike south while the Lannisters reeled from the Fry debacle. Robb listened, jaw set. "It was the phrase betrayal that cost us so dearly," he said. "But they've paid for that in blood. Still, the Lannisters remain. We cannot forget that. We must decide if we can finish this war or if we will sue for some manner of peace." Catelyn spoke softly, voice tinged with exhaustion. "Too much blood has been spilled for them to grant us peace easily, my son. You saw how Tywin Lannister orchestrates from afar. We must be wary." Edmure Tully, face drawn, nodded agreement. "The Riverlands are devastated. My people starve. I'd see them spared more suffering. But can we truly trust any peace offered by the Lannisters after what almost happened here?" In the hush that followed, gray wind prowled the edge of the hall, eyes glinting in the dim torchlight. A feeling of tension, like a coiled spring, filled the space. Finally, the Blackfish spoke. "Majesty, we have been dealt a savage blow, but we still stand. The men who remain will fight all the harder for having survived such treachery. If you mean to press on, they will follow you. If you mean to consolidate your hold in the north, they will follow you there too." Robb looked down at his splinted forearm. When he raised his gaze, a quiet resolve shone there. "The men call me the young wolf. They say I cannot be killed. They call me the unbent king who cheated the twins' massacre. But I know that's not true. Many died to give me this chance. If we keep fighting, more will die. I must weigh that carefully." He paused, then exhaled. "But if we yield now, then all we've done, all who've perished, will have been for nothing. The Lannisters will demand our surrender, our loyalty, and the Riverlands will be left at their mercy. I will not bend the knee to Joffrey Baratheon, nor any Lannister after what they've done to my family and my people." A ripple of approval spread through the lords. Even Edmure, though torn, bowed his head in agreement. The king in the north continued. "We will defend what is ours. The north is wounded, but we have cause yet. I will send envoys to the Vale, to the Iron Islands, seeking any allies who might keep the war from devouring us entirely. In time, we may have to march south again. For now, we hold the twins. It is a valuable crossing. With Walder Frey gone, we can control the flow of men and supplies across the Green Fork." No one contradicted him. They saw the sense in his words, though it meant more blood would be shed eventually. The Great John roared in approval, praising the king's wisdom. Blackfish simply nodded, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Catelyn's expression remained pained, but she reached for her son's uninjured hand, giving it a squeeze. After the council, Robb withdrew to a smaller chamber, once Walder Frey's solar, accompanied only by his mother and Grey Wind. The direwolf paced, sniffing corners. Robb sank into a chair, massaging his temples. "How did we know?" he murmured as if speaking to himself. "How did we escape when we were meant to be butchered?" Catelyn lowered herself onto a cushioned bench. "You saw that raven, and something in your instincts told you to move." He nodded. "A raven or something else?" "Mother," it felt almost like Bran. He swallowed hard, emotion welling in his throat. "I don't know how to explain it, but when I looked into that bird's eyes, I felt him." "Is that mad?" She hesitated, searching his face. "We have all heard the stories of the children of the forest, skin changers, greenseers. Sometimes, in the old tales, the Starks were said to have such gifts. I don't know if it was truly Bran, but if it was, your brother saved your life." Robb's voice trembled. "I wish I knew where he was. If he's alive, if Rickon is alive. Our sisters. Everything is scattered to the winds." He sank his head into his hands, the weight of kingship heavy on his shoulders. "I'm tired, Mother." She rose, moving to kneel at his side. Gently, she stroked his hair. "You must be strong," she whispered. "Strong for all our sakes. If Bran is out there, alive, I know he's doing what he must. We can only pray for the old gods to watch over him." For a time, they sat there in silence, mother and son, the faint crackle of flames in the hearth the only sound. Outside, in the hallway, men hurried about with the tasks of war. Beyond the walls, the land still bled. But in that quiet space, there was a fragile sense of hope. The Red Wedding had not claimed House Stark. The king in the north lived, albeit battered, his forces shaken but unbroken. That small grace burned in Robb's chest like a stubborn flame, refusing to be quenched no matter how dark the night might become. Far away, Bran felt that same flame, sensed it in his green dreams as he drifted toward the wall. And though he knew that his journey would take him into the cold heart of the unknown, he took some measure of solace in knowing he had done the impossible. He had changed fate. He had saved Robb, his mother, and countless others from a betrayal that would have wiped them from the pages of history. That single victory, however incomplete, was enough to sustain him for now. The days turned to weeks and weeks to months. The war raged on, shaped by the twinned victory, as some had begun to call it. Robb Stark secured the crossing at the Twins, forging an uneasy alliance with those Freys who disavowed Walder's treachery. The banners of the Wolf and Trout still flew from the towers, signifying the Stark-Tully claim on that strategic hold. Under Edmure's banner, the Riverlands rallied with renewed vigor, though they still faced Lannister aggression from the west. In the north, pockets of resistance to Bolton rule flared up. Small garrisons loyal to the Starks refused to bend the knee to Roose or his bastard. Their existence proved that House Stark had not crumbled. All the while, rumors persisted that a young, crippled boy who could walk in a direwolf skin had been the unseen hand that broke the Red Wedding. The Freys and Bolton scoffed at such talk, but they also ordered any small folk who spoke too openly of it flogged or worse. Fear of that boy, real or imagined, lingered in their minds. Bran himself traveled tirelessly northward, deeper into the mysteries that beckoned him. He dreamed of the Weirwood throne, of the old gods whispering in his ear. Jojen guided him, though the Crannogman's health sometimes wavered. They endured biting winds, snow flurries that stung the skin, the howls of distant predators. Yet the group persisted, forging a bond of mutual dependence. Nights by the fire, Mira told them stories of the Neck, and Jojen recounted half-remembered prophecies. Hodder offered warmth and simple, comforting repetition of his name, which in its own way told them they were not alone. In his quiet moments, Bran wondered if he would ever see Robb again in the flesh. If one day the king in the north would stand triumphant and greet him with a smile, or if the war would yet claim Robb's life. War seldom allowed happy endings. But each time doubt crept in, Bran remembered his brother's face in the Great Hall, the fierce determination in those gray eyes. The Starks were not so easily extinguished. Slowly, the realm adjusted to this altered reality. The phrase Red Wedding became a cautionary tale of ambition undone. House Frey was broken, their legacy tarnished. The Crown's wrath was kindled anew, leading to further bloodshed and maneuvering on both sides. Yet in every tavern, castle yard, and peasant hut, the talk always circled back to that night at the Twins, that moment when a raven's cry shattered Walder Frey's murderous plan, as if guided by some ancient magic. In the depths of winter's approach, beyond the shattered keeps and blood-soaked battlefields, Bran Stark found a strange sense of purpose. He was the boy who had once been paralyzed by a tragic fall, his future stolen, only to discover a power that allowed him to fly in his dreams. He had seen the swirling darkness of one of the greatest betrayals in the land's history and had refused to let it happen without a fight. He carried that knowledge in his heart, a secret flame that burned with quiet intensity. And so, as the cold winds howled and the snows piled high against ancient walls, the story of the Red Wedding changed from a simple massacre to a tale of near catastrophe averted by the slimmest thread of fate. Robb Stark remained the king in the north, battered but unbowed. Catelyn Stark remained at his side, her grief tempered by fierce devotion to her family. Walder Frey's bones moldered in the ground, his house diminished. The Lannisters raged, the Boltons fumed, and the realm braced for the next turn of the wheel. Yet in that swirling tapestry of events, no one could deny the presence of something greater, an ancient force that listened in the gods' wood and guided the flight of ravens. Bran knew it was not over. The true war still lay ahead, a war not of iron swords but of ice and death. Yet for now at least, there was a fragile hope for the living. And that hope gleamed like a lonely star in the northern sky, beckoning them onward, reminding them that even in the darkest night, one voice, one vision, one act of defiance could change the course of fate. Robb Stark stood atop the highest battlement of the twins' eastern tower, gazing out over the broad sweep of the Green Fork. His breathing was steady, but his bandaged arm throbbed beneath his cloak, a reminder that their victory at the Red Wedding had been as narrow as a drawn breath. The crossing below looked deceptively peaceful now, the water reflecting a dawn sky streaked with pink and gold. Guards patrolled the curtain walls, the clank of armor and faint voices drifting up to him. He could almost pretend it was any other day in a castle at peace, but the iron tang of blood still clung to the stones in the great hall below, and the ashes of burned corpses floated on the river's currents. It still seemed impossible that House Stark had escaped Lord Walder Frey's snare. At times, Robb caught himself recalling the sudden snapping of crossbow strings, the hiss of bolts, the screams. He could feel them in his pulse, a constant echo. Had it not been for that single, eerie moment when a raven's cry had made him look up, he would be dead. He had turned, met black avian eyes, and felt some warning ripple through his very bones. He had pulled Edmure down just in time, then the entire night devolved into chaos, a blood-soaked melee that ended only with Walder Frey himself lying in a congealing pool. And yet here Robb was, the young wolf, battered but alive. He closed his eyes. Perhaps only he and his mother truly understood how close House Stark had come to annihilation. They both suspected the raven was a sign from Bran. It was a child's fancy, perhaps, to believe his brother had guided him from afar, but after all Robb had seen, after all the old gods had thrown at them, he no longer doubted. If some powerful magic had allowed Bran to intervene, he was grateful. He would not question the method. All the same, the future weighed heavily on his shoulders. The north bled, scattered by the Ironborn in the west, the Boltons in the east, and the devastation of war across its heart. Winterfell itself was a charred ruin. The Riverlands, half-starved and haunted by raiders, looked to him for protection. The Freys might have lost their patriarch, but plenty of them remained, skulking in corners, eager to avenge their house's humiliation. The Lannisters would be enraged that the Red Wedding plot had failed so spectacularly. Nor was Roose Bolton likely to sit idle, though the disintegration of House Frey's power deprived him of his surest ally in the region. Every direction bristled with threats. Robb was king in the north, but he felt the title like a crown of ice-laden thorns. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find his mother, Lady Catelyn Stark, pausing in the archway. In the early morning light, she looked older, the silver in her auburn hair glinting. The slash on her arm was bandaged with linen, and beneath her weary eyes lay a sorrow too deep for tears. Still, she managed a small smile. "You should be resting," she said gently. "Maester Burnett told you not to strain that arm." Robb returned her smile, though it was tight with the burdens of command. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about our next steps. We've seized the twins, but we can't remain here forever, Mother." She exhaled, coming to stand beside him at the parapet. The rising sun caught the lines on her face, turning them soft and resolute all at once. "We've sent out ravens to the river lords, and to those loyal Northmen who still hold out against the Boltons. We have a measure of breathing room. House Frey was the great choke point in this region, holding the crossing. Now the crossing is ours, or as much ours as it can be. We'll see who answers your summons." He nodded. Just below, on the eastern approach to the bridge, a knot of riders was gathering. Some bore the sigil of House Lannister, others wore the black fish of House Tully. "Pledge your loyalty or ride away." So went his implicit ultimatum to those Freys who had survived. Some might accept him as the new master of the twins, at least in name, for fear of worse retribution if they resisted. Others would depart, preferring to cast their lot with distant kin or hide in the countryside. He could not and would not trust them. But for now, controlling the castle and the vital crossing gave him leverage in the region, something he needed desperately. Catelyn slid her hand over his uninjured arm. "Walk with me," she urged quietly. "There are matters we must discuss before you meet with the lords. Word from Riverrun reached me this morning." They descended the spiral steps into the dim corridors. Fires burned in the wall sconces, a feeble attempt to banish the cold that seeped into every stone. The twins had never been the warmest place, but it felt particularly grim now. Repairs to the Great Hall were underway. Scoured floors, broken tables replaced, crossbow bolts pried from beams. The stench of blood still lingered, impossible to wash away so soon. Robb wondered if the ghosts of that night would remain here forever. He suspected so. No one would soon forget the savage betrayal that had nearly succeeded. Inside what had once been Walder Frey's solar, a small brazier glowed. The walls bore the tapestry of twin gray towers, but the edges had been slashed in places. It gave the emblem a ragged look, as though House Frey were undone. Grey Wind was curled near the fire, half dozing, but he roused as Robb entered, his large golden eyes tracking him with quiet loyalty. Catelyn settled herself on a cushioned chair, wincing a little as she moved her bandaged arm. Robb took a seat opposite her, noting how the hush in this private room felt both somber and intimate. Here, mother and son could speak plainly without the ears of 100 lords. "What news from Riverrun?" he asked. "The garrison there still holds," she answered, folding her hands. "Edmure returned safely after tending to his wounds. He's trying to shore up alliances in the Riverlands, but the land is in tatters. The Lannisters keep launching raids from Harrenhal's environs, though the Mountain's men have drawn back somewhat since news of Walder Frey's death reached them. Jaime Lannister is rumored to be in King's Landing, though none can confirm it. Lord Tywin remains Hand of the King, and the boy King Joffrey sits the Iron Throne. They won't be idle. You know Tywin Lannister as well as I do. He's certain to respond to our survival." Robb's expression hardened. "He'll respond in force if it suits him. Or in cunning. We cannot discount the possibility of another trap, though we'll be more vigilant now." She gave a curt nod. "Edmure begs you to return to Riverrun soon, if only to show the banners that the king in the north is not cowed. But I wonder if that is wise. Holding these towers might be more valuable than mustering at Riverrun. Lord Bolton will be forced to adjust his plans. So will the Ironborn." At mention of the Ironborn, Robb suppressed a grimace. He had never forgiven them for what they had done in the north, for sacking Winterfell, and for all the carnage they had unleashed. "I received a raven from Deepwood Motte. Lady Mormont reports that some Ironborn have pulled back to the coast, but their hold on Moat Cailin persists, making it difficult to move armies north by land. I'll have to coordinate with my uncle. If we do manage to retake Moat Cailin, it could open a path to Winterfell." Catelyn studied him. "And is that your intention? To march back into the north, reclaim Winterfell from the ashes, and defeat the Boltons? To hold your kingdom behind the neck while the Lannisters rule the south?" Robb turned his gaze toward Grey Wind, who was panting softly by the fire. "I once swore I'd free the north from southern meddling, and that I'd avenge my father. Those vows haven't changed. But the Riverlands are part of our cause now, too. The Tully blood in my veins won't let me abandon them, even if the pragmatic choice is to retreat. I can't do that to Edmure or to you." She reached out, taking his hand. "You carry 2 kingdoms in your heart, my son, the North and the Trident. It's a heavy burden, but you've earned the loyalty of many men for sparing them at the Frey's feast. They say you fought like a true wolf, that you rescued your uncle Edmure, that you brought just punishment to Lord Walder's brood. They'll rally if you call them. Right now, House Stark's reputation is stronger than it has been since your father's death. Make use of that, but do so wisely." Robb nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what wise meant anymore. The war had become a swirling storm of uncertainties. Too many new alliances had formed and broken since Ned Stark's head fell in King's Landing. Still, for the first time in weeks, he felt that they were not standing on the brink of extinction. They had seized a portion of the board from Tywin Lannister, even if inadvertently. The cunning old lion had bet everything on Walder Frey's ability to assassinate the king in the north. The price of failure would be dear for House Lannister. That alone gave Robb some hope. A brisk rap sounded at the door, and a guard bowed his way inside. "Your Grace, Ser Ryman Frey requests an audience," he announced with stiff formality. Robb's stomach tensed at the mention of another Frey. So many of them had been scattered or killed during the uprising. "Show him in," Robb said with carefully schooled neutrality. Ser Ryman entered, eyes hooded, wearing half-armor over a tunic dyed in the pale gray-and-blue of House Frey. He was an older man with a peppered beard, face drawn in subdued anger, or perhaps fear. He gave a stilted bow, not meeting Robb's eyes at first. "Your Grace," he said, "my lady." He glanced at Catelyn. "I come to beg mercy for those in my family who remain loyal to the king in the north." Robb crossed his arms, feeling the pull of the bandage beneath his cloak. "Speak plainly, sir." Ryman swallowed. "Lord Walder was—" He lost his head, if you'll pardon the saying. "He bargained with the Lannisters, with Roose Bolton, with others. Many of us knew nothing. I've lost 2 sons in that carnage. My nephew Peter was, well, Grey Wind tore out his throat. He paused, voice trembling. I say this not to accuse, your grace, but so you know how dreadful the night was. I only wish to ensure the safety of my kin who did not partake in Walter's betrayal, who would bend the knee to you now if you let them. Bend the knee, Robb repeated, studying Sir Ryman's expression. Where was your loyalty 2 nights ago when crossbows aimed at my heart? He held the older man's gaze. I see the Fry sigil on your chest. I smell the fear in you. Tell me, why should I trust any man bearing that Bridgeend Tower's crest? Ryman's voice dropped. Because if we continue this blood feud, then you and your men might slaughter every Fry in these towers, but that will only kindle new grudges in my family's branches elsewhere. There are dozens of us scattered across the Riverlands. Some fought for House Tully under your banner. Others rode with the Lannisters. Frays have always spread themselves wide. I can't speak for them all, but I can speak for my portion of the family, those who had no hand in the ambush, those who took no pleasure in Lord Walder's vile plan. Let us kneel, your grace. Let us swear our swords, meager though they may be. Robb could see doubt flicker across his mother's face, but the practical side of him recognized the sense in Ryman's plea. Annihilating the Frays might feel just, but a total purge would mean not only unending conflict in the Riverlands, it would also brand House Stark as butchers who offered no clemency. Robb had to be a king, not a butcher. Swear it then, Robb said. Swear it before the old gods and the new. If you or your kin break faith, I'll see every man, woman, and child of House Fry driven from these lands, so help me. Are we clear? Ryman exhaled, shoulders sagging in relief. Yes, your grace. When the man left to gather whomever among the Frays would pledge fealty, Robb met his mother's eyes. She studied him for a moment, then dipped her head. It's the right decision, she said softly. I know you hate them, but if they'll truly serve you. Robb nodded, though resentment still burned in his gut. I don't want them near my councils. We'll keep them at arm's length, but best to keep them as nominal allies rather than drive them into the arms of the Lannisters or Boltons. Uncle Brynden would say a cornered rat will bite, but one fed scraps might remain tame enough to watch. Caitlin ran her fingers over a fresh tear in the tapestry behind her. You're becoming quite the strategist, my son, she said with gentle pride. Your father would be proud. She rose then, the lines on her face deepening with fatigue. I'll leave you to prepare. You've a long day of meetings ahead, and I have letters to write to Riverrun and Seaguard. Robb stood to help her, noticing how she hid a wince. Rest if you can, he said. You've done more than enough these last days. She gave him a faint, weary smile and departed, leaving him alone with Grey Wind. The direwolf padded over, muzzle tilting up to nudge Robb's injured arm. Robb gently scratched the thick fur behind Grey Wind's ears, comforted by his companion's steady presence. We survived, old friend, he whispered, though his eyes reflected a swirl of uncertainty. Now we must see what that survival costs us. Beyond the walls, the world was stirring with new possibilities and old grudges, all of it tangled into a knot. Robb summoned his resolve and made for the door, Grey Wind at his side. Far to the north, Bran Stark leaned against Hodder's broad back, half dozing as they plodded through a forest of towering pines. The damp smell of moss and cold earth mingled in the autumn air. Mira Reed led the way, her slender spear in hand, scanning for any sign of danger. Jojen followed close, quiet as ever, eyes far away in his green dreams. Summer trotted alongside, nose low to the ground, occasionally breaking off to scout the perimeter. The forest floor crackled underfoot with fallen needles and frost-crisp leaves. Somewhere behind them lay the ruins of an abandoned holdfast where they had sheltered the previous night. Bran's dreams had been restless again, filled with visions of swirling snow and armies in black, with glimpses of a looming ice wall that stretched across the world. Though autumn had not fully yielded to winter, a bitter chill weighed in the air. They were creeping ever closer to the lands beyond the neck, and from there, the great barrier of the wall itself beckoned. In the weeks since that fateful night at the Twins, when Bran had used his powers to warn Robb, they had traveled mostly under cover of forests and hidden passes, avoiding main roads. At times, they glimpsed columns of armed men flying the banner of the Flayed Man, House Bolton, patrolling for outlaws or scattered Stark loyalists. Once, they nearly stumbled into a camp of iron-born reavers. Bran could smell the tang of salt and hear the coarse shouting, but Mira spotted them first, and they hurried away into the thick underbrush. Bran's legs ached from the cold, though he could no longer walk on them. Or perhaps it was only his mind's memory of pain. The journey had grown more grueling, and the nights longer. Hodder carried him faithfully, but even Hodder tired more quickly now, stumbling over rocks and roots. Bran rubbed his numb hands together, longing for the fires of Winterfell and the comfort of a warm hearth. But that Winterfell was lost, consumed in flames. Each time Bran remembered it. Tall towers, hidden crypts, the God's Wood with its ancient heart tree. His chest ached as though pinned beneath a boulder. Now the old gods urged him north. Jojen had insisted that beyond the wall, near the Three-Eyed Crow's domain, Bran would learn to harness his gifts as a warg and greenseer. Bran thought of his dream of how he had steered a raven into the twins' great hall and changed the course of history. That was power, real power, but it had nearly shattered him. He wondered how much more he might accomplish if he learned from the source of that magic itself. Sometimes, though, he feared that wading deeper into those powers might cost him his humanity. As the day wore on, they found a narrow deer trail that wound up a slope thick with rocks and bracken. At the crest, Mira paused, hand shading her eyes. The pine forest thinned out, revealing a wide valley below. Beyond it, a haze of mist hinted at a distant river. The reeds conferred in hushed tones, trying to recall old Crannogman lore about hidden paths. Finally, they agreed to descend, picking their way down carefully. Somewhere past the valley lay the last stretch of land before the King's Road turned northeast toward the wall. At dusk, they made a small camp in a hollow near a cluster of boulders. Mira caught a hare in one of her snares, which they roasted over a meager fire. Jojen ate sparingly, eyes distant. Even the steam rising from the roasting meat seemed not to stir his appetite. Bran saw the lines of exhaustion in Jojen's face and remembered how heavily the green dreams weighed upon him. He asked quietly, "What do you see?" Jojen swallowed a small bite. "Snow," he whispered. "Snow everywhere. And shadows in the storm. I don't always know what they mean, but I see your brother Robb wearing a crown of ice that drips blood as though it's made from the fangs of a direwolf. And I see you in the roots of a white tree watching." A chill rippled over Bran's skin, though the fire crackled only a few feet away. "Is it a warning? Is Robb still in danger?" "Everyone is in danger," Jojen said softly, "in all the Seven Kingdoms. Winter is rising, no matter how men war among themselves. The real threat stirs beyond the wall." They lapsed into silence. Even Hodder seemed subdued, as though he sensed the heaviness of the conversation. Summer, sleeping with her muzzle on her paws, twitched occasionally, dreaming of a wolf hunt. Bran looked down at his hands, remembering the surge of primal power he'd felt when he seized the raven that fateful night. It had taken everything in him not to be lost in that moment. He wanted to ask Jojen if this journey would end up taking Bran's mind or soul. But he bit back the question, afraid of the answer. Later, as he sank into sleep, the dream came again. He was a weirwood with deep roots that stretched under half the world, entangled with the bones of ancient kings. His leaves were blood-red, rustling in a wind that wailed with voices of the dead. A flock of ravens circled overhead, cawing a dirge that seemed to call his name, Bran. Beneath the canopy, the ground glimmered with frost, and the shape of a monstrous dire wolf padded through the snow, leaving crimson paw prints. The dream shifted. He saw Robb in a hall of banners, the dire wolf's sigil bright on them. 1,000 men knelt at Robb's feet, but their eyes were hollow, their faces half-eaten by ice. Then, in a rush, the vision turned black, and Bran felt himself hurtling through a cold void where only the voices of the old gods echoed. He awoke gasping, heart hammering. Mira was at his side in an instant, a hand on his shoulder, while Summer stirred with a low growl. Bran forced a shuddering breath. "It's all right," he managed, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. His dreams were telling him something. He only hoped he would be strong enough to face it when the time came. In King's Landing, the Red Keep bustled under the bright glare of midday sun, its crimson walls overlooking the sprawl of the capital city like a proud hawk. Carts and wagons jammed the streets below, and from the windows of the Tower of the Hand, one could see the glimmer of the Blackwater Bay beyond, dotted with ships. A faint tang of salt hung in the air, mixing with the more pungent smells of a crowded metropolis. Lord Tywin Lannister, Hand of the King, stood behind his desk, scanning the newly arrived dispatches. His face was a mask of implacable calm, but the tautness at the corners of his mouth betrayed his anger. The plan at the twins, so painstakingly arranged, had collapsed. Walder Frey was dead, leaving House Frey in shambles and House Stark unexpectedly reinvigorated. Tywin's pale green eyes flicked up as he heard the door open. Lord Varys, the Master of Whisperers, swept in, hands folded in the voluminous sleeves of his silk robe. My lord hand Varys cooed. I bring you tidings from the Riverlands. Tywin gestured sharply. Speak. It seems young King Robb holds the twins quite securely. Some of the Freys have sworn fealty to him, or so they claim. Others have fled, though there's little love for them among the local smallfolk. The crossing is Stark territory in all but name. And in the north, Bolton's men face increasing resistance from Stark loyalists who believe their king lives yet. I'm told Great John Umber is free, rallying forces near the last hearth. Tywin's brow furrowed. Walder Frey's bungling has done more than just fail to remove Robb Stark. It's emboldened him. And what of Edmure Tully? Alive and recovering, Varys said. He's at Riverrun, coordinating with his nephew. Lady Catelyn Stark remains the spiritual heart of the rebellion in the Riverlands. If the small folk had wavered before, this betrayal at the twins has galvanized them. Tywin placed the dispatches on his desk with cool deliberation. My men at Harrenhal report that the Frey archers stationed there are pulling out, uncertain whether to side with the king in the north or remain with us. The Freys were our key to controlling the Green Fork. Their removal from the board in any meaningful capacity is inconvenient. Varys offered a sympathetic smile. Most inconvenient, my lord. The war drags on, with House Lannister lacking its most cunning advantage. Some might even whisper it was the gods themselves who intervened at the wedding. Tywin fixed Varys with a cold stare. The gods had nothing to do with it. Perhaps the Starks have some vile greenseer trick, or perhaps it was simple luck. Regardless, we must move forward. I still hold Sansa Stark here in King's Landing, do I not? She can be a valuable piece. And while Arya Stark remains missing, her fate unknown, we suspect she might be in the Riverlands. If so, we can exploit that. Varys bowed his head. Very true, though I hear the bastard of Bolton hunts for Arya Stark as well, or so rumor claims. Lord Baelish, for his part, is absent from the capital, presumably occupied with matters in the Vale, as you commanded. Tywin exhaled through his nose. Baelish will do as he's told, or he will suffer the consequences. For the moment, our best recourse is to contain Robb Stark. If I cannot crush him with a single stroke, then I will bleed him slowly. Our supply lines out of the Westerlands remain strong. The Riverlands are battered. So is the North. If we force a war of attrition, the wolf must starve eventually. Varys inclined his head. A wise approach, my lord. And what of Prince Oberyn and the Dornish delegation soon to arrive for the royal wedding? They will want some sign that the Iron Throne is secure and that your grandson's reign is stable. Tywin's jaw tightened, recalling that King Joffrey's wedding to Margaery Tyrell loomed. The city prepared for a grand spectacle, an event meant to symbolize Lannister-Tyrell dominance. Prince Oberyn is here for reasons of his own, vengeance for his sister, no doubt. But for now, we will host him. And once the wedding is done, the realm will see the union of the crown with Highgarden. If that does not deter the boy in the north, we'll simply outlast him. Stark has the advantage of youth and valor, but I have the coffers of Casterly Rock and alliances that span the Reach and the Crownlands. Even with Walder Frey gone, the odds favor us. We must show no weakness. Varys watched Tywin for a moment, then offered a placating smile. Of course, my lord. I shall continue to gather whispers. He bowed and slipped away, leaving Tywin alone with the silent weight of all that had gone wrong at the twins. Lord Tywin Lannister, had he been a man prone to displays of emotion, might have raged or cursed Walder Frey's name. Instead, he allowed himself one quiet exhalation, then rang for a servant, already composing letters to the various lords of the realm. If the Starks would not fall easily, then the game must be played more carefully. Every move, every alliance, every threat. In the end, Tywin was certain he would preserve House Lannister's power, but he could feel the shape of the board shifting beneath his feet, more uncertain than it had been in years. At the Dreadfort in the north, Roose Bolton sat in his solar, reading by the wan glow of a few candles. Outside, the sky roiled with heavy gray clouds, the approach of early winter storms. His castle's grim walls loomed over a courtyard strewn with the banners of the flayed man. A hush had settled over the fortress, broken only by the distant moaning wind that slithered through arrow slits like a restless spirit. A knock sounded, and Maester Qyburn, banished from the citadel, accepted here by Bolton for his unorthodox skill, entered, head bowed. "My lord, you asked for reports from the field. I have them." Roose set aside his parchment. "Speak." Qyburn cleared his throat. "We've lost contact with several of our outriders near the last hearth. We suspect the Great John has rallied a portion of his men, though their exact strength is unknown. They move swiftly, striking supply lines, and we hear rumors that Robb Stark survived the Frey's trap. News from the twins suggests Walder Frey is dead. The castle belongs to the Starks again." Roose tapped a finger on the table, his eyes as pale as ice water. "I had hoped to break the Stark cause at the twins. Tywin Lannister assured me it was a sure plan, and now I am left exposed. Lady Barbary Dustin in Barrowton wavers in her support. The Ryswells and some of the Serwyns are likewise uncertain. They fear retribution from the surviving Starks." "Ha!" A small curl of disgust touched his lip, the nearest thing to an expression of anger he ever showed. Qyburn inclined his head. "Should we dispatch your bastard son to quell these uprisings more aggressively?" "Ramsay is eager to please, my lord." Bolton's voice was cold. "Eager, yes, but too brutal to be effective in the long run. Ramsay leaves scorched earth wherever he goes. Still," he tapped the table again, considering, "we may need that brutality. If the Great John or any other Stark bannermen gather an army, we must remind them of the cost. The bastard of Bolton can do that quite convincingly." Qyburn nodded. "As you say, my lord." Roose turned back to the parchment he'd been reading. A letter from the south, carrying Tywin Lannister's seal, urging him to stand firm and promising reinforcements that might never come. "Lord Tywin would have me strangle the north while the Lannisters deal with the Riverlands. But with the twins lost, his vow of southern support is worthless. They cannot march an army through a crossing Stark now holds." His pale eyes flicked up, meeting Qyburn's unwavering gaze. "Have the ravens readied. I'll send messages to White Harbor. The Manderleys may yet side with me if they think it profitable, or if I can convince them that Robb Stark's situation is more precarious than it seems. We shall see. If that fails, we must consider more severe measures." Qyburn offered a respectful bow. "I'll see to it at once, my lord." The maester turned maverick left, and Roose Bolton allowed himself a moment of silent contemplation. The alliance with the Lannisters had seemed so promising, a clear path to power for House Bolton. Yet now that path was murkier. The Starks should have been wiped out at the twins, but here they were, not only alive but occupying the Frey's seat. "Fate is never certain," Roose murmured to the flickering candle. Then he extinguished the flame with a pinch of his fingers, plunging the solar into darkness. Back at the twins, the day's business of cementing alliances and securing the crossing left Robb bone weary. He stood in the courtyard, exchanging farewells with Lord Jason Mallister, who had arrived that morning to pledge renewed support. The Mallisters had always been staunch Rivermen loyalists, and Walder Frey's treachery only steeled their resolve to stand by House Tully and House Stark. It was a small comfort to Robb that some old allegiances remained unbroken in this realm of shifting loyalties. After Lord Mallister departed with his retinue, Robb turned to Edmure Tully, who stood leaning on a staff, his side still bandaged from the crossbow bolt he'd taken. Edmure offered a faint grin. "I'll be off tomorrow morning back to Riverrun," he said. "I need to ensure the Riverlords remain united. The news of Walder Frey's death has emboldened some, while others fear Lannister reprisal. They'll need to see their lord in person." Robb clasped Edmure's forearm gently, mindful of the man's injuries. "You're still wounded. Shouldn't you rest a few more days?" Edmure made a pained face. "I've been resting in my own way. Not as well as I'd like, but Riverrun calls me, and you know it. We've too few allies left as it is. If the men see their lord hale enough to ride, it will hearten them." Catelyn stood nearby, expression fondly exasperated. "You Tully men and your pride," she muttered. But Robb could see she was proud of Edmure's resilience. The threat of betrayal had tempered Edmure's once willful spirit, turning him more serious, if no less stubborn. In this war, such changes often came too late, but at least they had come. He gently rested a hand on Edmure's shoulder. "Very well, but I'll send a small escort of my own men to accompany you. And if something happens, send word at once." Edmure nodded. "I will. And what of you, Robb? Will you hold the twins for long?" Robb glanced up at the stone towers rising on either side of the river. Freymen, now nominally his, stood guard, along with Stark bannermen. "For a time. I can't ignore the North forever, but the advantage of the twins is too great to relinquish while we're engaged in this war. Let the Lannisters come. I dare them to cross this river under my watch." Edmure smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "Be wary, nephew. We know how cunning Lord Tywin can be, and the Boltons are a threat closer to home." Robb's jaw tightened. "Aye, they are. If we can retake Moat Cailin, we'll have a clear road to confront Bolton. But that means dealing with the Ironborn who still hold it, and who knows what madness they're up to now that Balon Greyjoy is rumored to be dead." Edmure rested more weight on his staff. "This war grows more complicated by the day. But you have the North's cause at heart, and the men sense it. They'll follow you. I'll do my best to keep the Riverlands steadfast." He paused, swallowing. "You saved me in that hall, Robb. I won't forget it." Robb's throat constricted with emotion as he recalled the memory, the swift dash of bolts, the frantic scramble under tables, the screams echoing from every side. "I only wish I could have saved more," he said quietly. Edmure touched his nephew's arm in understanding. Then he turned to Catelyn, embraced her gently, and limped off to oversee the final preparations for his departure. She watched him go, face shadowed by memory, then let out a soft sigh. "Sometimes I think the gods test us beyond our endurance," she murmured. "Yet here we stand, defiant still." Robb wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "The old gods watch over us," he said. "We have to believe that." She nodded, blinking away tears. Then she composed herself, stepping back. "I'll go see to the supply lists for Edmure's departure. It's a small measure of organization, but these days even small victories count." Robb watched her walk away, feeling once again the ache of all they had lost and the weight of what remained. He absently stroked Grey Wind's fur, finding a bit of comfort in the direwolf's presence. "We keep going," he whispered, half to himself and half to the beast. "That's all we can do." Near midnight, in a small, cramped room of the Eastern Tower, Catelyn knelt by her bed, hands clasped. A single candle flickered on the bedside table, casting dancing shadows. The chill seeped through the stone floor, and she pulled a threadbare blanket over her shoulders, more for comfort. Then warmth. Her arm throbbed beneath its bandages, but she paid it little mind. Instead, she prayed. She prayed to the Seven, for her father's soul in the afterlife, for her children's safety, for the Riverlands to find peace. She prayed also to the old gods, thinking of Ned and Winterfell's godwood. There was a time she might have felt guilty about mixing prayers, but these days she embraced any deity that might listen. So much had gone wrong, yet the children she had left still lived. Sansa was in King's Landing, a hostage perhaps, and that tormented Catelyn. Arya was missing, her fate unknown. Bran and Rickon were presumed dead, though she had glimpsed impossible hope that Bran, at least, might be alive somewhere. Robb was here, at least, though war threatened him from every side. She closed her eyes, breathing softly. If Bran did indeed save Robb at the Twins, it meant he was out there, possessed of some gift or power beyond her understanding. Could she dare hope that both her younger sons were alive? It felt like too much. Yet the sight of that raven overhead in the hall, the chill that had run through her as she'd sensed some intangible presence, she could not discount it. "Watch over them," she whispered to the darkness. "All of them, please. Let me see my girls again. Let my boys survive this. Let Robb hold his kingdom safe." Her tears fell onto her folded hands. In the silence, the candle flickered, and she thought she felt a faint breeze brush her cheek as though some answer stirred in the night air. She did not know if it was the Seven or the old gods or mere fancy. But she took solace in that breath of wind and rose to her feet, determined to face whatever dawn might bring. Weeks slipped by in a harsh season of storms and bloodshed. The days turned colder, and in the north, snows began to fall. At the Wall, the Night's Watch toiled under Lord Commander Jeor Mormont's uncertain leadership, uncertain because the Watch had been bruised by betrayals at Craster's Keep, and the Great Ranging had ended in disaster. Rumors spread that strange creatures haunted the haunted forest, that the dead walked in the far north. Fewer and fewer recruits arrived from the south as the War of the Five Kings consumed the realm's attention. King Stannis Baratheon's defeat on the Blackwater had left the Watch with no southern champion. If the real threat came, they would stand alone. Yet the Black brothers carried on, manning the wall with stoic endurance, never suspecting that in the shadow of that war, a crippled boy with a gift for green sight crept ever closer. Bran Stark's party skirted the edges of abandoned crofts and hidden tracks to avoid confrontation. The roads were dangerous, haunted by bandits and worse. Several times they heard the distant thunder of hooves and glimpsed the banners of House Bolton. Each time, they hurried into the thick woods until the threat passed. Mira's skill in hunting kept them fed, though meagerly, while Jojen's visions guided them on seldom-used paths that wound inexorably north. Hodder bore Bran without complaint. though the slope of his shoulders grew heavier as the days dragged on. One evening, they found refuge in a cluster of standing stones that local legends claimed were once giants turned to stone by the sunrise. A ring of ancient weirwoods stood beyond them, their carved faces so worn by centuries of wind and rain that their expressions seemed blank. Bran felt a shiver as they approached. The pale bark and red leaves were reminiscent of Winterfell's heart tree. Had these weirwoods once been worshipped by the children of the forest? Perhaps so. Bran could almost feel them breathing with a slow, ancient pulse. They gathered a small fire from fallen branches, and Bran drifted to sleep, half sheltered by a monolith's base. The dreams came on stronger than before. He soared as a raven over endless snows, saw the glint of ice far below, and beyond the edge of vision, he sensed a monstrous host. He flitted between dying trees, each trunk carved with the grimaces of old gods. Then he glimpsed a swirl of green dream, his brother Rickon, shaggy-haired and hungry, running through some dark place with a dire wolf pup by his side. He heard Shaggy Dog's distant snarl, echoing as if in a tunnel. Then the vision shifted. Robb stood in a swirling snowstorm, wearing a crown made of direwolf teeth that dripped with red meltwater. He reached out, calling Bran's name, but the wind snatched it away. When Bran awoke, tears stung his eyes. Rickon might still be alive, but in peril or lost. Would they ever be reunited? And Robb, stoic in the storm, battered by war. Bran hugged himself for warmth, blinking into the darkness. The ring of weirwoods around them rustled their leaves, though there was no breeze. He felt summer's presence stirring in his mind, a comforting brush of consciousness. Then the direwolf padded over to him, muzzle dipping to lick his cheek. He pressed his face into that thick fur, heart hammering, and whispered, "I'm all right. Thank you." Mira woke, rubbing her eyes. "Bad dream." Bran nodded, swallowing. He did not share the details. There were too many unknowns, too many fears that might only cast a shadow over them all. But Mira understood. She settled beside him, propping her spear across her knees. "We're close to the wall," she said quietly. "You'll learn the truth there, or beyond it. If your brother Rickon lives, you'll find him one day. If Robb needs your help again, perhaps the gods will guide you as they did before." He tried to accept the comfort in her words, but the future loomed like an uncharted sea, and the only compass he had was a gift that frightened him as much as it beckoned. South of the Neck, the realm continued to churn in conflict. The Lannisters solidified their hold on King's Landing, preparing for King Joffrey's grand wedding to Margaery Tyrell. Ships arrived daily from the Reach, laden with food and goods to feed and entertain the capital's teeming masses. Yet behind the gilded pageantry, rumors of the Red Wedding's failure stirred unease. The common folk whispered that the Freys had attempted black magic only for the old gods to strike them down. Some swore that the Starks could turn into wolves, that Lady Catelyn drank blood from Walder Frey's heart. Fantastical stories abounded, each wilder than the last. The Iron Islands were in turmoil. Balon Greyjoy's death at Pike had sparked a succession crisis. Word drifted back to the mainland that Balon's brother Euron Krasai had returned to seize the Seastone chair, while Balon's daughter Asha contested him. Victarion Greyjoy loomed as well, a powerful commander in the Iron Fleet. All the while, their raiders in the north skirmished with scattered Stark loyalists. Moat Cailin remained an Ironborn fortress, blocking passage up the King's Road. But the Ironborn sense of direction faltered without a clear leader, allowing some Northmen to slip around the flanks, harassing them in the marshes and forests. Amid this roiling sea of intrigues, the one constant was the slow, inevitable turn of the seasons. The days grew shorter, the nights lengthened. Frost rhymed the ground in the pre-dawn hours. The white ravens from the citadel had not flown yet, but everyone knew winter was near. Even the southern lords could feel the chill creeping in from the northern frontiers, as though an ancient breath exhaled from the lands of always winter. In early morning gloom, Robb Stark and a small retinue rode out from the eastern gate of the Twins. The sky was leaden with low-hanging clouds. Robb wore boiled leather over chain mail, a fur-lined cloak thrown across his shoulders. The wound on his arm was healing slowly, but healing nonetheless. Gray wind padded alongside the horses, occasionally loping ahead to sniff at the roadside brush. They were bound for a forward camp near the border of the Riverlands and the Neck, a place where some of Robb's scouts had reported Ironborn incursion. He had decided to see the situation for himself. Once, his mother would have insisted he remain in the castle for his own safety, but Robb was not a child to be coddled. He was a king who needed to lead by example. Catelyn had asked to accompany him, but he had convinced her to stay at the Twins and coordinate supply lines with the Tully and Lannister forces. In truth, he wanted her safe within stone walls. The journey ahead might be dangerous. They rode in silence for a time, the horse's breath pluming in the chill. Robb's mind drifted to half-remembered images from that terrible night, the glint of crossbow bolts, the wild chaos of battle. He recalled the raven overhead cawing as if in alarm. He'd felt a jolt in his heart as though a pair of invisible hands had seized him and yanked him aside. A moment's difference, a fraction of a heartbeat, and Walder Frey's betrayal would have killed him, Edmure, and his mother. Bran, he thought. If it truly was you, thank you. I will not fail our house now. I will fight on for your sake, too. As he rode, that unspoken promise burned in his chest. And for the first time since Ned Stark's execution, a fragment of faith in something larger, be it the old gods or the love of family, steadied him. The road ahead was fraught with enemies, but he felt a quiet certainty that House Stark was not as broken as their foes believed. They reached the forward camp by dusk. Tents huddled in a clearing ringed with tall oaks, and the smell of cooking stew wafted on the air. Guards snapped to attention at the sight of Robb's banner, the gray dire wolf on a field of white. Inside the largest tent, the great John Umber awaited him, a grin splitting his bristling beard. The huge man's voice boomed in greeting. "There's the young wolf, come to sniff at the Ironborn with us," he roared, seizing Robb by the shoulders in a bear-like hug. Robb chuckled despite himself. "Great John, it's good to see you." The big man's grin faded into seriousness as he led Robb to a crude map spread across a camp table. "We've been hunting these Kraken lovers for weeks. They hold Moat Cailin, but they're also sending small raiding parties into the Neck, harassing the Crannogmen, capturing any supply wagons that dare approach from the south. We keep trying to lure them into a pitched fight, but the Ironborn slink back to their fortress. That cursed Moat Cailin is nigh impregnable from the south. 1,000 years of bad memories clinging to those stones." Robb studied the map. "If we want a safe path home to the north, we need Moat Cailin. But the Ironborn inside are stubborn. Even battered as they are by infighting, they won't give up the fortress easily." He traced a line with his finger. "What if we approach from the west, around the swamps near Greywater Watch?" The Great John shrugged. "Tricky territory. The Crannogmen know it well, but it's near impossible for heavy cavalry. Mira Reed's father, Howland Reed, might assist if he's about. But the Crannogmen are as elusive as ghosts. They come and go without a word." Robb nodded. "We might need to rely on cunning. Starve the Ironborn out or lure them away. If Moat Cailin falls, we can push north and deal with Roose Bolton. But first, the Ironborn. One war at a time." He exhaled. "Set scouts along these routes. Block their supply lines from the sea if you can. I'll coordinate with you from the Twins by Raven, but I plan to return soon with more men. We can't let them keep strangling the way north." The Great John grunted in approval, then eyed Robb up and down, noticing the bandaged arm. "Still healing from that treachery at the Twins, eh?" he said. "You're a tough pup. Surviving that fiasco. I always said the old gods favor the wolves." Robb managed a half-smile. "Perhaps they do." His gaze slid toward the tent flap, where Grey Wind stood watch. "Let Walder Frey's demise serve as warning to all who betray us. The Starks will not go quietly into the night." The big man threw back his head and laughed, then clapped Robb on the shoulder. "That's the spirit, your grace. We'll make these Ironborn curse the day they landed in our north." They conferred long into the night, drafting plans and listening to the latest reports of Bolton patrols. Some said Ramsay Snow was terrorizing peasants near the Barrowlands, burning entire hamlets. Others claimed the bastard had tortured a group of Stark loyalists in ways unspeakable. Robb's stomach churned at the thought. War was ugly enough without such cruelty. He vowed that House Bolton would answer for all of it. But first, the Ironborn had to be dislodged. When at last Robb crawled into a bedroll in a corner of the tent, he found sleep elusive. Memories of the Red Wedding hovered, weaving with fresh worries. He closed his eyes, letting exhaustion wash over him. In his final waking moments, he silently thanked whatever force had stayed Walder Frey's arrows. Then blackness claimed him. He dreamed of snow, swirling in the courtyard of Winterfell, the walls battered and scorched. He stood alone by the heart tree in the godswood, its red leaves fluttering in a frigid wind. In the dream, the tree's carved face opened its eyes. They were Bran's eyes, and a raven perched on its branches. Robb tried to speak, but no words came. Then the dream dissolved, replaced by darkness. In that same darkness, miles away, Bran woke with a sharp jolt. His heart pounded, as though he had just run a great distance. The ring of weirwoods was silent around him, but he had felt Robb's presence, fleeting as a shadow. He tried to hold onto the sense of it, but it slipped from his grasp like smoke. He felt only the cold, and Summer's warm body pressed to his side. Hodder snored softly, curled behind him. The reeds dozed on the other side of the dull embers of their fire. Bran closed his eyes again, letting his breathing slow. He had touched Robb's mind, or Robb had touched his, for the barest instant in the realm of dreams. That was enough to confirm that his brother still lived, fighting on. A swell of hope mingled with sorrow. They were parted by leagues of war-torn land, each forging a separate path. Bran did not know if destiny would bring them together again, but for now he clung to that thread of connection. The next day, they resumed their trek north. The forest soon gave way to a broad, wind-swept plain dotted with icy ponds. A thin layer of snow dusted the ground in patches, swirling whenever the wind gusted. In the distance, the pale line of the King's Road stretched like a vein. They kept to its edges, wary of travelers who might be foes. Twice they hid from armed bands flying the flayed man sigil. Another time they spied a group of refugees, ragged small folk with carts and children, heading south, fleeing the cold and fear. A woman with hollow cheeks saw Bran's group among the scrub and cried out, but Mira motioned for silence and the two parties parted ways without a word. War had taught them all to trust no one. At twilight, they halted near a low ridge overlooking a lake. The water shimmered darkly under a sky stained purple by the setting sun. Summer padded off to chase a rabbit or sniff the shoreline, while Jojen and Mira made camp. Hodder found a flat rock to sit upon, carefully easing Bran off his back. Bran shivered, pulling his cloak tight. Mira returned with a handful of fish skewered on a sharpened stick. "We'll roast them," she said. "Better than nothing." While they prepared the meal, Bran stared out at the lake. His mind wandered to all that had happened since he'd fled Winterfell, the capture of Theon Greyjoy, the burning of his home, the endless journey. He thought of the red wedding that nearly was. A flicker of pride moved through him. He had changed that. He might be a cripple, but he wasn't powerless. The old gods had chosen him for something. After supper, the sun dipped below the horizon. Dark clouds rolled in, promising more snow. They had little enough shelter here, just a few stunted trees and a shallow depression in the earth that would partially shield them from the wind. Jojen reminded them that they could not risk a large fire. Enemies might see the glow from miles away. They banked the flames to a low smolder and huddled close. As Bran lay there, half reclined against Hodder's side, he considered reaching out with his mind again, trying to slip into a raven and see how far he could fly. Yet he was wary. The last time he'd done something so bold, he had nearly lost himself entirely. Jojen had cautioned him that too much, too fast, could devour him. So he waited, teeth chattering in the chill, trusting that soon enough he would find the teacher he needed. A faint snow began to fall. Mira coaxed a little more warmth from the banked coals. Summer returned, shaking water droplets from her coat and settled protectively near Bran's legs. The wind sighed through the scraggly trees, sounding almost like a voice. He listened but could make out no words. Instead, he shut his eyes and drifted to shallow sleep, lulled by the hush of falling snow. In his sleep, he dreamed of the wall, an impossibly vast white barrier that glistened in pale moonlight. Something stirred beyond it, a darkness full of cold blue eyes. Then he felt a pull as though invisible hands were guiding him to a hidden door at the wall's base. Step by step, he descended into blackness beneath the ice, following the echo of a heartbeat that was not his own. "Bran," a voice whispered. "The hour grows late. Hurry." He saw flickers of a cavern lit by pale roots that glowed softly. Shadows danced on the walls, shaped like ravens, wolves, and strange children with large, dark eyes. He awoke with a gasp, breath steaming in the frigid air. Jojen was awake too, staring at him. "I saw it," Bran said in a hushed voice. "I saw the way. It's near the wall. A door or a tunnel. That's where we must go." Jojen nodded solemnly. "We're close. Another few days, perhaps." Then you'll learn the truth of who you were meant to be." Bran's heart pounded with both excitement and dread. He glanced at Summer, who regarded him with golden eyes. "We'll face it together," he murmured. "All of us." Outside, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the land as if to muffle the screams and tears of a realm locked in war. But far away, two kings, one on the Iron Throne, one in the north, turned their pieces on the board. Armies clashed, ravens flew, and the strings of fate pulled tighter. And above it all, the winter skies watched, silent and cold, waiting. Another fortnight passed. In King's Landing, the wedding of King Joffrey Baratheon and Marjorie Tyrell erupted in a spectacle of opulence and cunning. The city groaned under the influx of lords, knights, and performers. Golden roses decked the streets, and the aroma of fresh bread and lemon cakes wafted through the markets. Yet behind every fanfare was a note of tension. News of House Frey's downfall lingered like a foul odor, stirring rumors that the old gods favored the wolves. King Joffrey, chafing under the stories that robbed him of a sure victory in the war, demanded ever more lavish displays to prove his magnificence. Tywin Lannister stood watchful, forging alliances with the Tyrells and Dorne, determined to surround the surviving Starks with overwhelming might. But in the midst of that golden feast, whispers of war and murder continued. Some dared to dream that King Joffrey's own wedding might hold dark surprises. Meanwhile, at the Twins, Catelyn Stark received ravens daily from Robb's forward camps. He was making progress in containing the Ironborn, though not without losses. She oversaw the movement of supplies, the forging of alliances with lords once loyal to Walder Frey but who now hesitantly bowed to the Starks. No day passed by without some new challenge. Envoys from the Vale came quietly, speaking on Lisa Arryn's behalf, hinting at possible assistance if the Starks could persuade them of the war's justice. In turn, Catelyn wrote letter after letter, appealing to alliances old and new, reminding them that House Stark had always kept faith, that the Red Wedding was not the doing of the North but of a treacherous lord who now lay in his grave. Even so, she spent many evenings alone in her chamber, kneeling in prayer, or pacing by the narrow window that overlooked the courtyard. She often thought of Sansa, captive in King's Landing, of Arya, lost, of Bran and Rickon, perhaps gone forever, perhaps saved by some twist of fate she did not understand. It weighed on her heart like a stone. North of the Wall, in a place few men had ever tread, white winds howled across icy plains. The others stirred at the fringes of the living world, an ancient threat awakened by forces beyond mortal ken. For now, they lingered in the darkness, gathering strength, a silent tide that would one day sweep southward unless men united to stop them. But the Seven Kingdoms were far from united. Their kings squabbled over crowns, while far away, across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen nursed dragons and dreams of conquest in Meereen. The world spun on, heedless of the doom creeping closer. At last, Bran Stark and his small fellowship spied the wall. It loomed like a colossal cliff of pale ice, stretching east to west across the horizon. Dawn's first light caught its surface, making it shimmer with faint iridescence. Bran stared in awe, breath caught in his throat. He had heard tales of the wall his entire life, but none did justice to the sheer immensity of it. It was as though giants had raised an unbreakable barrier against the sky, indifferent to time and war. Hotter murmured, hotter, softly, as if in reverence. Mira and Jojen gazed in hushed wonder. Even Summer cocked her head, ears pricked, as though sensing something vast and powerful. The air was colder here, a biting wind that cut through fur and cloth alike. "We made it," Bran whispered, eyes shining. "Now we must find the gate or tunnel I saw in my dreams." Jojen nodded, though tension lined his face. "The Night Fort is near here, but it's abandoned. That might be where your visions lead us. A secret door, the Black Gate. It's said to be hidden at the Night Fort." Mira shivered. "Abandoned or not, I've heard the Night Fort is a place of dark tales. The Rat Cook, ghost stories, monsters. The Night's Watch doesn't man it any longer." Bran clenched his jaw. "We have to go. There's no other way I know to pass beneath the wall unseen. If we approach Castle Black, the Night's Watch might turn us away or question us. We can't be delayed." Hodder shifted from foot to foot, as though uneasy, but he carried Bran onward without complaint, the boy's slight weight dwarfed by his broad back. Summer bounded ahead, sniffing the frozen ground. They trudged for hours, the wall growing larger and larger until it dominated their entire field of vision. Eventually, the looming silhouette of a ruined fortress appeared at its base, crumbling walls, collapsed roofs, the remains of towers eaten by time and neglect. The gatehouse looked half-buried by snow and ice. Wind whistled through the empty courtyard like a chorus of the dead. This was the night fort. Bran's heart pounded. A shiver ran through him that had nothing to do with the cold. The place felt saturated with old sorrow, old secrets. Mira and Jojen moved warily, weapons at the ready. Hodder kept muttering "Hodder" under his breath as if the place spooked even him. Summer halted at the threshold, ears flattened. The dire wolf let out a low growl but did not retreat. They entered the courtyard. Drifts of snow lay in corners. Jagged remnants of old wooden scaffolding jutted from the walls, and a broken well yawned near the center. The hush was absolute, as though the ruin itself held its breath. Bran swallowed. "Somewhere here, there's a hidden way," he said. "Beneath the castle, leading under the wall." Jojen closed his eyes, letting out a slow breath. "Yes. In my green dreams, I saw a door. We must find the well or the stairs that lead down." They searched among the rubble, pushing aside rotting beams. The walls groaned ominously in the wind. More than once, Hodder hesitated, glancing back as if to plead that they leave. But Bran urged him on gently. At last, they found a stone stair spiraling down into darkness beneath the keep's foundations. A gust of musty air met them, carrying the smell of damp and decay. Summer refused to descend at first, whining at the top step. Bran tried to soothe her, but the direwolf's hackles bristled. In the gloom below, it felt as though ancient eyes watched them. Finally, Mira coaxed Summer with a calm hand and a hushed voice, and the wolf relented, stepping warily onto the worn stones. Jojen lit a torch. Its flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on damp walls slick with condensation. The steps wound downward, deeper and deeper, until all sense of the surface world fell away. Bran could feel his heart thudding. Each drip of water echoed in the corridor like a distant footstep. Once or twice, they thought they glimpsed shapes slithering at the edges of the light, but the shadows fled before they could be certain. At the bottom, they emerged into a wide chamber. The ceiling arched overhead, half-collapsed in places. At the far end stood a patch of utter blackness, a doorway, perhaps, but too dark to see clearly. As they approached, the torchlight revealed a weirwood face carved into the door itself. The wood was pale, threaded with red veins. Eyes closed, mouth a silent line. Bran felt it in his bones. This was the Black Gate, the secret path his dreams had foretold. With trembling hands, Jojen offered the torch to Mira. He stepped up to the door and spoke in a low voice. "We come seeking passage. We come in the name of the old gods." For a moment, nothing. Then the carved mouth slowly opened, revealing darkness beyond, and a soft, whispering voice emerged as though from the very wood. "Who are you?" Bran swallowed, a chill prickling the back of his neck. He thought of Ned Stark, of Winterfell, of the dire wolves that had bound him to something older than he understood. Summoning courage, he said, "I am Brandon Stark, son of Eddard, of the blood of the first men, and I would go north. I would go beyond the wall to find the three-eyed crow." In the hush, the door's carved eyes seemed to flicker open, revealing black hollows. "Then pass," it whispered, "and seek what you must." With a scraping groan, the door swung inward. A gust of cold air billowed out, blowing the torch flame sideways. Beyond lay a cramped tunnel, its walls glimmering with ice. Bran felt a surge of both fear and exhilaration. This was it. He glanced back at Hodder, Mira, Jojen, and Summer. Their faces reflected his own awe. Then, together, they entered the passage. The darkness swallowed them. The weight of the wall pressed down, millions of tons of ice overhead, the legacy of the first men and the Night's Watch. Each step echoed with a soft crunch. Bran's breath formed clouds in the thin, frozen air. As the door closed behind them, its wooden face melding seamlessly with the ice, he thought he heard the faintest of whispers, "Fly or die, Brandon Stark." They pressed on, each footstep carrying them deeper into the realm of snow and wind, of old gods and new dangers. Whatever lay beyond, they could not turn back now. Bran's heart hammered with anticipation, fear, and a sense of destiny that felt far larger than a crippled boy ever could have imagined. If his powers had saved Robb from the Red Wedding, that was but the beginning. The real war was ahead, in the land of eternal winter where the greatest enemy of all stirred. And Bran Stark, guided by half-understood gifts and unwavering hope, would face it head-on, one step, one dream at a time. In the months to come, the realm south of the Wall would continue its bloody dance. Robb Stark, the young wolf, would fight to reclaim the North from the Boltons and the Ironborn, forging uneasy alliances and repelling Tywin Lannister's probing assaults. Catelyn Stark would hold the twins, her presence a reminder that the Starks had not been vanquished, that the Game of Thrones was far from decided. The Lannisters, the Tyrells, the Martells, all would maneuver and strike, forging pacts and breaking them as suits their ambitions. Winter would creep ever closer, snows thickening on the roads, hampering armies and chilling hearts. But unknown to most, the critical pivot had already happened on that night at the Twins when a raven's cry shattered Walder Frey's cunning plot. A boy with broken legs and a restless, ancient power had defied the tide of fate, preserving the king in the north from a doom that seemed certain. That single change sent ripples across the tapestry of destiny, granting House Stark a spark of hope that might otherwise have been snuffed out. And so the story continued, no longer the tale of a red wedding but of a twinned victory, incomplete and stained with blood, yet enough to sustain the wolves in a world grown harsh. Whether that hope would be enough to unite the realm against the greater threat beyond the wall, only time would tell. For winter would not be denied, and the horrors that lurked in the endless night cared little for the crowns of men. Yet in the hearts of the Starks, in the green-seer dreams of Bran, in the howls of dire wolves echoing through snowbound forests, a single truth endured: when men stand at the brink of darkness, even a small ember of defiance can blaze into a fire that lights the night.